So must be scooted like way this way. Can you actually scoot it back? I've never had that problem before, but I actually need to scoot it back a little. Okay. So I like adjusted it. I don't know. It seems like it's closer than it normally is, which is good actually. So for the executive committee meeting, so here's the thing. If it's too far away, then the people on the screen can't tell what anybody is doing. So what if you just took that table and, excuse me, rotated it so it was like an end cap? So it sort of looks like, you know, we thought about it a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll do the same, and then it kind of feels like, look, and then we actually just might, depending on how many people come, if we need to, we can scoot back so that the ends can be seen. And if they don't, then we won't. So I'm trying to find a document that Katrina sent me, you know, like a month ago or more, that I cannot seem, I mean, I just need to look again. But it was that like action item, like what works.
Oh yeah. I feel like I have that somewhere.
Yeah, we do. It's, I mean, we're not ready for this meeting. What is that?
Stylus?
No idea. So the thing with Colton, was talking to Colton, and then I was like, oh, I should probably talk to the judge. Oh, well, if I'm not gonna judge in Colton, I probably need to talk to Amy Baker. So I crafted an email to all three of them, and then I thought, I guess I need to get back to Christina first and make sure, here, I'll say, and make sure that she doesn't want to stay on. So I kind of hope she doesn't. I mean, she's fine. She's not the most involved board member, but she's not the worst either. She clearly at one point was ready to cycle off, but I think at the time our bylaws required her to cycle off. And now they've been updated. So the maximum is 12 years. So she had got it all set up to have a replacement, and then that person, some dates come up personally. So we just need to reconnect with her. I'm telling you this because I need you to send me that exact same email that you sent me today in like 2 weeks.
Okay.
To say, hey, did you connect with Christy to see if she wanted to stay? And then if not, then do that. And if so, then do you still need to reach out to, you know,
Gotcha.
everybody else? Okay, so let's see here. We are in like ultra full screen. So we need to figure out, oh, there we go. And all right.
what this is?
Yeah, that thing, I don't know either.
It was like a thing you could use on your computer, but it doesn't do anything.
What? What? Oh, the General Assembly.
Fun stuff.
I don't even know what it's supposed to mean, but it's just kind of funny. Okay. Yeah, maybe they're not coming out.
John said he would be here, and
And this is the right
yes,
login.
I just double checked that.
Okay. Oh, there's Brent. Great. Hi, Brent.
Sorry, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're our first person, so you are good.
This was supposed to be remote, right? Or was I wrong?
It was, but we have an executive committee meeting right after this, so
Gotcha.
we just decided to set up in here, and then Simon and I could stay, so.
Cool.
Yeah, just as a reminder, this is intended to be the internally focused component of the work with, some additional details that need to be worked out, but with the intention of trying to integrate with the Chamber's DEI committee as much as possible. I have not had a chance to have like the official powwow with Kristen and Chris Owens, but I did have an offline conversation with Chris Owens, and he seemed very favorable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it's all good. This is Katrina's coming on here. This is Chamber Day for Katrina. This is her third chamber thing today.
Yes, it is.
So
Chamber Day for
she's officially a chamber staff member now, I think.
I think so. I'm gonna be at the next staff meeting. You're gonna be like, wow, what?
Yeah.
I was like, for sure you weren't gonna be on here. I was like, Brendan's not gonna be on here. He just got out of his board meeting.
Look, I changed and everything. Do you see
You
that?
did. You
Like
did.
Good day.
cool. Hey, hey, John.
Hey.
This is everybody. Gina's not able to join. Oh, good. Ashley's coming. Cool. So we're still getting the hang of having 5 standing committees in a month. So part of today's work will be kind of forming the agenda moving forward. So apologies on that, but Katrina, I know you had asked for a number of documents. So happy to kind of lay out, since we have Ashley here who's kind of not familiar. I need to join the meeting actually from my computer. I just realized I didn't do that, and I can show our DEI statement that was created last year. So John, while I'm doing that, would you mind to kind of talk through a little bit about how this group was sort of born out of MBO, and then maybe Katrina, you could kind of talk about your vision for all this.
Sure, there's not a whole lot of history to this. It was identified during strategic planning that we didn't have really any intentional message on diversity, equity, or inclusion, and had prepared a statement and I forget what we called it, but a sort of working plan around that.
Yeah.
But it just really still felt like it was something that was written and not something that was actionable.
Yeah.
There was debate about how do we make it actionable? Is this a subcommittee? Is this its own committee? And there was very strong consensus that it needed to be its own standing committee, equal in stature to the other 3 committees that we have: business services, program and youth, and the membership and business outreach committees. So to form the committee, I brought it in as a MBO kind of exercise to understand who would be the right voices in this. And that led us to really recognizing that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, given what the chamber's already done. But how do we still make sure that we don't just be a chamber dotted line and ignore what work we have to do from the ad perspective or the WIB perspective? So what we created instead was what I call it sort of a mini committee, which really is comprised of current chamber DEI committee members, myself excluded, that are also involved with looking at the lens internally within the WIB and where the WIB WIB has oversight. That's the background.
Cool. So here at the top is the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that the board created during the strategic planning process. And then we also have a value statement, and we updated the value statement to reflect the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement as well. So I'm going to close the door really fast. Be right back. So as everybody was coming on, I was able to share that we have not had a chance yet. Ashley and I haven't had a chance yet. We have it scheduled, but we haven't had a chance to get together yet. I ran into Chris Owens at another event and just kind of threw out the idea of, hey, you know, what do you think about trying to incorporate this work together? And he's, you know, generally was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Well, let's think about that, you know. So we need, Ashley, if we can try to get something on the books, I'm assuming like after we meet the first time, which I think it might be next week. It's pretty soon. But with Kristen and Chris and you and whomever else needs to be in that meeting, to talk about what does that look like, kind of big picture standpoint. The other thing I had in my notes from the last time this group got together is I know I'm planning to attend the event, I think it's on the 3rd, but I'd like to kind of formally encourage all the other WIB members to attend as well. And I don't know that I have the promotional materials for it. So if somebody can please forward that. I'm sorry if you have already forwarded it to me, but if you could forward it to me again, I want to make sure to get that out to everybody, ideally today, so that they can register. Cool, thank you. Copy that. So I can stop sharing so that everybody can see each other, but I'll copy this. Maybe I can do that from here. Yeah. And I'll just put this in the chat in case anybody wants to refer to it. So the idea of this particular group is, as John said, to really look at some of the internal workings of the WIB, and then to be thinking about how does it look for us to kind of show up in the chambers group, and you know, with Katrina being the liaison, right? Katrina, I think. Do you kind of want to outline your thoughts, and then we can I can try to answer some of the questions that you had asked me earlier. Katrina, does that sound fine? You had sent me some questions about documents, and yeah, there's not one for the ad, so we're working on that.
And yeah, for sure. So I think, you know, like you said, it's two parts to it. One is how do we work with what the chamber is already doing with DEI and make sure we're pushing that to everybody that's on the WIB and that they're included and part of that work that's already going on. And then I think, like you said, separately too, there is this review of the WIB itself, you know, our practices, you know, where our board stands with DEI, and then, you know, looking at even our operator and how those, and making sure that their practices with our families are equitable. So I think it's two pieces to this committee. And so I think, like you said, with the chamber, it's making sure that we're intentionally involving everyone on the WIB to know what's going on. Like you said, letting them know about this mixer that's going on, not just letting them know, but also saying, hey, we'd like to see 10 members from the WIB participate, you know, really challenging them to be a part of that, and making it, really a piece of what we're doing. One thing that I had recommended that we do on the internal side is really use that framework, that Awake to Work framework, to look at those three pieces, to look at the board, to look at the operator, and then to look at the management piece. There's, I think there's like 8 pieces, but, to start out with, just looking at one aspect of each of those, and then trying to lay out where we are right now, set some benchmarks, and then say where we want to go, or where we want to go from here. What are we trying to obtain as a WIB?
Right. Let me make sure that everybody, I have that open, but let me forward that to everybody so that everybody's got that. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. Okay, I love it when my computer tries to outsmart me. I really just wanted to forward the email, not open another one. Let me see. Okay. As far as the framework, and I can pull that up for everybody to see here in just a second. I completely agree that in terms of internal processes, I think that's kind of was the intention in the strategic planning process, was to both look externally and internally about, hiring, subcontracting, and especially impact to our clients. One of the things that we have been doing as of late, as part of the other part of the strategic plan, which is update of our data, all of our key performance indicators, we have been trying to get more detailed information about the individuals being served at the Career Center. And eventually, and this is kind of for Ashley's benefit, but just as a reminder, there are kind of 2 lines of work of what we're doing with the funds that we receive. One is that we are making sure that the career, okay, you guys I just sent the email. We're making sure that the career centers operate in Northern Kentucky, that, they're accessible, that the partners are aligning with one another, that the clients don't feel like they're going to 14 different partners, basically, right? So that they walk in, that they walk in, that they know that they're going to get help with career assistance, and that they don't necessarily have to think about, oh, I'm at the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, or, oh, I'm at Goodwill, or, whatever. So one of the things that has come up when we look at the data is some partners actually have policies about how do they track, data for race, ethnicity, gender, etc. So we have been working, even though this group is I know it's taking us a while to support this group's rolling out, but we have been working on, you did not get an email. Okay. We have been working at trying to develop, I don't know, it might actually just give it a sec, because it says it went. Sorry, distracted. We have been trying to track who is coming into the Career Center, and at least to see who are we serving. So we have now in the door reports that can be broken down by location. And then now we're working on, when someone comes in, how do we ask them various questions to get, real answers. So what we've come up with is that the receptionist or whomever greets them at the Career Center we'll ask them some questions. And, not that this group necessarily wants to be in the weeds administering every aspect of, this work, but I do think it would be interesting to have some conversations about, what is best practice around having people identify, how do they identify by race, by gender, by ethnicity, et cetera. So those are the kinds of details that we could potentially cover as we're trying to track who are we serving in the career centers and what is their experience. Somebody might come into the career center and all they want to do is use the computer. And that's totally fine. Other people come into the career center, they are determined to be eligible for WIOA, and they go down a very customized and intensive set of career services. We want to be able to track what their experiences were as well, right? And so those are the other kinds of things that we might be looking at in terms of data, is trying to really disaggregate what's going on and who's being served. Meanwhile, I did have a meeting with Tom West last week about the neighborhood immediately surrounding the Covington Career Center, which is our comprehensive center with the most partners. And they are very interested in having the career center, they own the building, having it be more of a center point for helping the residents in that neighborhood reach gainful employment. And so this group could also look at things like geographic or cohort-based outreach that might be appropriate to really make sure that we're serving areas that have traditionally been underserved in new ways with workforce development services. So I just kind of want to outline a few of the different ways that I think the internal lookings of this, that this might look as we're thinking about the WIB itself, that may or may not make sense to incorporate into the larger DEI committee. Could make sense, but maybe not. So those are sort of three areas. Does that, any thoughts about that?
I think, yeah, like those areas are sort of outside, just specifically looking at the WIB itself. So, right, that's what you're saying. I think, yes, definitely one, looking at the data, the demographics of the people that we're serving at the career center and using that as a benchmark. I think that's one part. I think two, that we need to look at the board itself. I think, it's definitely you want to look at the people where they're being served, but I think you've got to look at the board.
Yeah.
And then you've got to look at the leadership, and you've got to look at the practices and the policies that are in place, because then that's going to inform really the interactions with the community and if they will come in or not. You can have a beautiful layout, but if you haven't created expectations and policies and procedures and train people on how to be inclusive, it's not going to be. And so I think you've got to, when we're thinking about the WIB specific, we've got to look at the board, we've got to look at leadership, policies and practices, and we've got to look at the community. I think those are the three areas where you're going to see where it's going to make an impact.
Yeah.
And I was just going to piggyback on that. I mean, and I apologize. I'm going to take myself off camera as I can, just because I didn't get to eat breakfast or lunch. So I'm just sort of doing, I didn't want y'all to sit here and stare at me while I stuff food in my face. We're going through the same thing, Tara, that Katrina just described. I mean, for the last number of years, we have been, it may not seem apparent, but we've been working really hard on this. And we need to measure, I say we, the WIB and the committees, if we're not already. So I'm making an assumption there that may not be, but you may be. But looking, regularly looking at the committee structures, the diversity on the committees, the diversity on the board, and what was just described, some of the surveying, I think, the board, and using the data of those surveys to kind of drive our actions. We're going through the same stuff. Just I mean, we've been doing the same thing. Our board, go back a decade. Maybe we had one person of color on our board, maybe a decade ago, and now we have 11. It's not something that's changed overnight, but it's we've been very intentional about it in really recruiting and trying to get more engagement on that front, so that, because that will impact the outcomes. It starts with the governance piece and those committees, and then kind of flows from there. You got to do both. Clearly, you got to do both. It's not like you do one and not the other. But from my perspective, that's one of the things we've really been working on. And so I would, in the survey piece is important, in the training piece, like Katrina said, having, and those two go hand in hand, I think, is doing a board exercises, or setting up some sort of process that integrates in with the existing process in such a way that you feel like your board and your leadership are. And I got the email. Yeah, I got the email.
And I want to just piggyback too on what Brent is saying there. And Brent, he doesn't want to take any credit, but until Brent came, there was one. And it was really within the last 2 to 3 years where the chamber decided that they were going to be intentional. The board chair, and I think, this is something that the executive committee can tend to talk about. They were very intentional about who joined the board. And so that's how they were able to diversify. Brent has the same requirements as the rest of us do. You have to have the people in this sector, and that sector, and in this sector. We all have that. But even within the confines of that, they were still intentional in making sure that they did get diverse candidates. And so I think that's something that we can glean from the chamber as we're looking at our membership composition, to make sure that whatever sector it falls in, that we are being very intentional and strategic about diversifying the board itself. And I think that's one imperative that we could put out there. And I know John has been intentional about that, but saying it in a way that we are going to be intentional when we're looking at these particular areas. This is what we're looking for.
And we always making the business case for it too. It's good business, and here's why. And the other thing I just want to, in terms of procedures, I mean, it's like what should happen is all the vendors that you use, and all the, when you're doing hiring and you're doing, RFPs or anything like that, that diversity is included in that, in the consideration for, are you working with a minority owned vendor? Are you, is that one of the check boxes that's being asked? And for everything, like for the chamber, it's like, the food that we purchase, and it may not be possible, just so you know, it may not be possible. Like, for example, insurance is an example. As the insurance company, when you do an RFP for insurance, are we considering that as one of the factors? Still, at the end of the day, you may not go with a minority owned business, and that's fine, but you're being very intentional and deliberate about making that one of the factors that you're looking at. And all things being equal, you might give preference to the minority owned business as an example. I'm just throwing that out there as one thing. And that's some of the stuff that we're trying to do as an organization, but we're trying to model for everybody else. And that's where, again, I think our DEI committee really, to me, is kind of, to piggyback on what John was saying earlier, we're trying to, it may just be chamber specific in that instance, but we're hoping to model for everybody. We're hoping everybody does this. So it's a community-wide thing. And it's, and then when so again, processes for hiring, processes for, your committee and board makeup, surveys. I think that's all using data to make decisions on how we're doing and assess how we're doing. I will tell you, at the chamber, we're nowhere near where I want to be with diversity on our committee makeup, just so you know. I mean, I'll tell you, it's something we're actively working on, and it just takes time. The board is an example. You just can't kick board members off. They got terms of service, and we've got, there are a couple maybe I wanted to, but it's just one of those things. Actually, you didn't hear me say that. Every board member.
Brent.
Awesome.
I know a guy.
Yeah. But it does take time, but that's where the data and the being deliberate really plays into it. So I'll quit filibustering here, but I just wanted you to know that's kind of the stuff we've been going through, looking internally. And I do think it can be a model for the WIB and for, all the partners of the WIB.
one thing I'd like us to keep in mind is this is a WIB committee. We can certainly, to your point, Katrina, we should definitely be looking at this, applying this lens as we look at how the WIB is structured. Who is on the board, who is in, who are in positions of committee leadership, which is also our pipeline towards being board chair. That's very important. But there's another element that I honestly don't know kind of what our power is or what our intention is, and that's with the ad. A lot of the work that the WIB guides is executed by staff members of the ad. So Tara, I'd like to understand from your perspective, is part of this mission also meant to look at what is ad leadership and ad policies?
Sorry, I was in the last question about what does diversity mean to the WIB, because I do have a comment about that in a second. So I would say that is something that I've been thinking about. I'm associate director for workforce development at the ad, but I'm not the executive. Katrina, I didn't send it to you because you sent it to me. Because you're the one that forwarded it to me from the beginning, sorry. I can forward it back to you though, if you can't find it.
It's a big email, it's a big attachment.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm not the executive director, right? I'm not a board member of the ad. So I think certainly as a member of the senior staff of the ad, I have the ability, and I have been, it's not like the DEI statement and the work that we've been doing just happened by accident. I'm very interested in this as well. I came from the United Way. This is something that I think is critical. I also have to recognize that, there's only so many changes that I can make all at once. So I have been talking to the senior staff at the ad about the work that we are doing, and they are very interested and asked me, to keep them apprised because they are interested in potentially changing some internal policies in this regard as well, and would like to, use this work as a model. So that is the direction that I see. I don't know if you've heard, but the ad is about to undergo pretty major change. Our executive director, Lisa Cooper, has announced that she is retiring. So I don't really foresee that's going to be effective August 1st. So I don't necessarily foresee a huge number of changes coming before August 1st because there's already a lot of changes coming, right? It's not really the most ideal time to start changing major policies, but I definitely do see a potential, whoever the next leader might be, to be able to go to them and say, hey, this is something that the WIB has been working on, and it's important to us for the ad to consider these changes as well. And I think if we're able, especially to point to real examples of what we've been able to do, I think that will make a big difference. So in terms of in the meantime, we are currently undergoing a complete and total review of our RFP process for the WIB, for the subcontractor roles. And I say roles because we're going to do it differently this time, but and have multiple contracts, not just one. So this is a perfect time to be looking at, what does a DEI statement in a procurement process look like, right? How do we weight that? How do we put that in? This is the perfect time because we only do that every 3 years. So there's a lot of things that I think we can get started that eventually can roll up into the ad. This is I think if I'm not mistaken, our strategic plan is a 5-year strategic plan, maybe 4. I need to double check that. But either way, I feel like over the life of our strategic plan, we very much can make some recommendations that could really make some changes at the ad itself. So I don't know if that's an answer, but that's kind of the way I see it happening.
And I think too, Tara, along with that is, like you said, really focusing in on the expectations of the operator, because whoever the operator of the services is, they're the ones that have that are front facing with
Yeah.
the families. And so making sure that, we have clear expectations around DEI
Absolutely.
within the RFP,
Yes.
to clearly guide them.
Yes, and I think that, I mean, because of the timeliness, back to Ashley's question about, what does diversity mean to the WIB? Things like being ready for individuals that come into the Career Center for whom English is not their first language, right? And what does that look like? Because right now, I'm pretty sure we're using Google Translate, which is not ideal. Yeah. And so we have been talking with them about utilizing the state's has resources for a call line where you can get an actual professional translator. So there are changes that are ongoing that we've been working on since I started. But having them all in one place is really what I see the value of this committee, to really capturing what our values really are. And then how do we administer those in a way that's really beneficial to the clients that we're trying to serve. I did want to just mention one other thing about what does diversity mean to us. We are under guidance by the United States Department of Labor with regard to something called priority of service. So when we think about who we are serving, there are a number of considerations. I'm just going to put this in the chat and then I'll copy kind of the relevant. So things like individuals that are receiving public assistance, individuals who are deficient in basic skills, low income individuals, including veterans and their eligible spouses, are supposed to receive services ahead of other job seekers. So I know it's a lot, but the link can kind of get you there. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, board of directors, cool, thank you. That doesn't mean that we can't think of other things, right? Such as race, ethnicity, gender, certainly geography as well. But I just wanted everybody to know that we do have some definition in terms of who, there are groups listed in terms of who we are supposed to be prioritizing with regard to service. So I did just want to put that out there. Certainly, I think that we all know that there are individuals who probably, unfortunately, are more likely to fall into these categories than others, both from a geographic standpoint in terms of where they might live in our community. And so I think it's really important to think about this as we think about everything from where the career centers are located, how do we get the word out about them, how do we engage with our community in a way so that, yeah, communication multiple languages. Yeah, we have, and we do have new documentation that we recommended to the operator with regard to how to be more welcoming for those that don't speak English as their primary language. But I'll look at that too. That looks interesting.
And Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she's saying in a larger context, I hear what you said, Tara, and I think that's important, to define those communities and all of that. But I think what Ashley is talking about is something larger as it relates to diversity. So I don't know, Ashley, you want to just talk about what you really meant with that?
Yes, and if it's loud, it's because we're having a party for someone here. When I looked at the website and I was reading your document, you put a diversity and inclusion statement, but we did an inclusion statement at the chamber. And what I've been telling the staff is until you don't have to say it, you have to say it. So when you say diversity, what do you mean? Because when I say diversity, I mean something different. You might be thinking race. Most people put racial diversity. That's how they clarify it. I'm just talking about your race. We are different. But at the chamber, and I've talked to Brent about this, and to how we talk about the makeup of our board, we had to include women, age, how they identify sex and sexuality, gender expression was included, years of service was included for diversity, which other people may not. So we didn't want to have people who had only 20 plus years of experience. We wanted the 5 to 10 range. So when we talked about diversity and how he's explaining it, I know through the lens, because he talks about it all the time with our staff. We talked about it with our board. We talked about it with our DEI committee. So they understood when the chamber says diversity, we're talking about this. It's a little bit broader than other people. It's not just Black, white, Hispanic, because that's what people tend to think. When you say diversity, they immediately go race. It's just that we had to be a little bit broader with our definition at the chamber because we always are making a business case. So that's why I was asking, when you say diversity, what do you mean? You're going to have to say that and spell it out over and over and over so people get it. So when they hear you say it at the WIB or people at the WIB say it, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, this is the diversity that they're talking about and not just race. Our DEI committee, though, the focus is just Black and Hispanic businesses for this iteration, simply because people say diversity, you start bringing in, if you add women, you're going to lessen the amount of access for people who are Black women. There's an intersectionality there. Hispanic women, LGBTQ, gender non-binary, like you start to lessen it when you add in, if you allow white women to be a part of it. So our DEI committee at the chamber was specific to Black and Hispanic businesses because they are underserved and underutilized because they're not being seen if diversity is too big of a title. So we had to be very specific and intentional. Now we can broaden it up because we're going through iteration 2 of the DEI committee, but it's still very much a focal point to get more Black and Hispanic owned businesses involved with the chamber.
Yeah.
So that's the goal of our committee currently. But I was reading your list and it has collaboration, equity, and customer focus, but I'm not seeing like clearly when you're looking at the Kentucky Career Center or the WIB, when you say diversity, what do you mean? So that we can make sure we're using the same definition.
Well, and this kind of gets to my point and why the governance matters is because, you know, I'm a bald white guy, IT guy, right? That's the lens I look through. But one of the things I've learned is that there are ideas that come from the diversity in and of itself that I wouldn't have, you know what I mean? That we wouldn't have had. And that's part of what I'm getting at with, like, when you talk about the programmatic stuff, Tara, I think that's great, by the way, everything you've said, I don't disagree with, but personally, but there might be other ideas that come from when we have a board and committees that are more diverse in their makeup. And that's kind of why I was saying, I think if I were to prioritize things, I would start with the leadership first.
Yep.
And really survey and the training piece, because I think the training thing, again, something I've learned along the way, the training stuff really matters with that. And so I would prioritize that early on. To John, to your question from the ad, I just want to follow up on that. You know, I have in my head, the WIB has a $3 million budget roughly. Am I making that up, Tara? That's Brent math. It's 4 now, $4 million budget. So of the 4 million, it really goes to the partners, right? It goes to those, you know, the ag gets a piece for administration, but that's pretty set defined, right? It's not like somebody has to do the administration in every community. In Kentucky, it's just the ad districts that do it. But in Cincinnati, it's a different mechanism. Southwest Ohio WIB gets their money. Yeah. So I don't know that we necessarily impact the ad itself, but I was really I was really glad to see you put the links to the Brighton Center and so on, because that's exactly right. Those partners, what are they doing for their vendor hiring? What are they doing for their services and that kind of stuff? Those are the questions I think the committee, the DEI committee, this group would advise up and hopefully have an impact on. I wasn't really thinking of the ad district, although I think the ad should do those things. And if they're not already, they really should, but that's not the money that we can control. The money we can control goes to the vendors, and that's where we would have the big impact. So I just wanted to share those thoughts. Leadership.
That clarifies it.
training,
It was more of making sure that we understand it, because I think we're using some language that
Yeah, you're right.
talks about internal staff and kind of people doing the work.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know if we wanted to get into that. I mean, it doesn't hurt to bring the conversation up, but I want to make sure what are our clear objectives, so that this committee is doing very, I would say, like targeted work. I mean, we are not a big group, and right now we're sort of operating outside the rest of the WIB in terms of how they're thinking about their priorities as committees, and certainly as a board as a whole. So I hope that we as a committee give the leads the tools to quickly get to understanding how to incorporate this, because I suspect that many do not know how to do that. So I want to start at where we can have the most influence translate that down into how we can have the most impact until this committee, whenever, if that ever happens, I should be saying whenever that happens, but until it doesn't need to be its own committee. But we're not there. So we need to help those see this from that perspective and translate that into the so what of that. I had lunch with Lawrence Jones yesterday, and he brought groundwater to my attention.
Yeah.
I'd gone through training with the Latino Leadership Institute on inclusion, and he suggested that, for my members, as I'm having this conversation with them, that groundwater might be something of value. I don't know enough about it yet. He just sent me the link for it, so I've not explored it. But Tara, you might know that from your.
Yeah, it's
Brent
definitely.
did it. Yeah, Brent and Triad did it together. The chamber and Triad did it together.
Yeah, I did it once when they opened it up kind of to nonprofit, leadership in general. And it was great, half a day. I will say, I think just because of my time at United Way, I kind of felt like there were some items that I had experienced, but I mean, it is a really strong introduction to the work. I mean, what I have not had a chance to do is some of the follow-up trainings that come after the groundwater training. And I'm hoping to be able to do some of those in the future. That's,
I think it's a starting point is really, and I think the chamber did this too, is really even just surveying the members, the board of directors to say, where are you in this journey of DEI with your company? What are your thoughts? So then we know where the members are. A lot of people say they don't see a need for it. They don't think it's necessary. That's just where we are in this region. And if that's the information we get back, then we can start with the training piece to say, this is why, this is the business case, to get people on board with even understanding why we're taking this on as a will. So, I mean, for me, I always think start with the top leadership to make sure, one, where they stand with it. Then two, you can begin to address it and provide some training, to them, so you can begin to create policies and procedures that are going to be impactful in this area.
Yeah, and this may not be a fair assessment, but just because I think the WIB is where the chamber was, and by the way, chamber is not anywhere near perfect at this point. Okay, so I don't even want to come off that way. We got a lot of work to do. Okay, as a business community. To Katrina's point, I still get emails. I actually just got one 2 weeks ago. We've got a lot of work to do. But my sense of it is the WIB is doing what the chamber was doing, which was, do we have Boone, Kenton, and Campbell? Do we have some Southern counties represented? Do we have manufacturing, logistics, IT, finance, healthcare, and so forth? I don't think the chamber was not, and I think is now, but was not. And I'm not sure the WIB is where we say, do we have, we're 4%, 5% African-American. Do we have 4 or 5% representation African-American on the WIB at the very least? Do we have 4 or 5% Hispanic representation? Do we have, if that Hispanic is our fastest growing segment, and the business community is pretty loud in saying we want more immigrants. We want more people coming here from outside the region and outside the country. So that's what I mean.
We don't have that conversation, Brent, and we really have just begun to really focus on, are we representing
right.
all of our areas, especially outerlying counties.
Yeah.
Until Zoom was an option, that was a losing proposition. So
for sure,
we're finally getting to the geographic diversity. So it's not just a bunch of really two counties, honestly.
Yeah, then where they get taken back.
But Campbell's pretty quiet from a business standpoint. So I think we've been very intentional about that, and looking at making sure that we are diverse in our makeup from our industry sectors. We have not even begun the conversation of who is in the room from those other segments.
And because it took us so long, John, to get, I'm just telling you, it took us years to get to 11. Years to get to 11. Think about that. Like, I think, and I'm proud of that, by the way. I'm not it's only 11, but that's 11. But it just, because it takes so much time, I think that's something that I would start with. I would start with leadership. I would start with the surveys. I would start with the training. And I also think those are, in terms of tangible and process relate, we can make some headway and show some improvement pretty quickly. And at the very least, if that's one of the factors we're considering right now, you know, we can implement that right away. And I think that's a good place to start personally. I don't, again, Katrina and Ashley, I don't know if you feel differently, but that's kind of where I was coming into this, was I thought that would be some place to start. The other things, the programmatic stuff, you know, we got to do more than one thing, and we can go down parallel paths clearly and should. But I think we need some other perspectives in the room too. That's kind of.
Brent, if you still have your survey that you sent to the board member, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. You know, that's something, Tara, that if Brent's willing to share, we can look at it and see if we need to tweak that some. But something that we could immediately send out to the WIB board and just start there with the response.
Yeah, for sure. We can share the results too. Happy to.
Yeah, that would be amazing. At least as a starting point. Yeah, we could change, you know, revise as needed, but as a starting point, that would be extremely helpful. Would really appreciate that. So what I have as far as kind of the first thing that this committee would like to do is really get a better feel for what our board, where our board is, right? Like, what do they feel like? Where are they on the path? You know, what do they feel like is needed? That kind of thing. So that would be number one. Priority two, looking at our subcontractors. So in this particular case, I think the place to start with that would be our RFP. We have a meeting coming up, so I can make sure to kind of think the best way to handle that. But
Tara, we can share some language with you that we put in all of our RFPs about minority contract. What is your, because we asked them, what is your minority spend? What is your minority composition? You know, we asked all of those questions up front.
yeah, that would be perfect. Because I think rather than trying to figure out, it would be great to just be able to put sort of best practice language into the, you know, RFP in that way. And then the committee can, so the weighting, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but the weighting currently with the RFP needs to be redone. Everything is being redone about it. So it hadn't been redone in a long time. So this would be the perfect time to take some of that best practice language about contracting and hiring and be able to insert that into the documentation. So yes. And if anybody, you know, if Katrina, you have some, sounds like the chamber probably has some. So, you know,
I would definitely venture in to say, always to tell people your why. We do that here at the chamber. Brent will talk about, like, this is why diversity is good business. But then when you start talking about minority, which is a completely different word, you have to define what minority means to you. Are you including Afghan refugee workers? Are you including second chance workers in your minorities? Like, what are you including? Because it's not the same. And being very intentional about those words as well. Some people will not acknowledge a veteran status. Some people do acknowledge veteran status. So just want to make sure that when you go into this, you're giving people the definitions that they can choose from, the definitions that the WIB wants to be included in minority, so that everyone knows kind of where they fall.
Yeah.
And then just explaining the why. Here's why we're asking. We're asking for these particular reasons that keeps everyone aware. They don't feel attacked. They don't feel like you're making a case. That's what my email was about. Someone said, like, you're making it political. You don't want it to be political. It's not political. We are asking this. This is going to give us good data. This informs the direction of the WIB. This is how we make sure we're an inclusive place. Like, this is our why.
Yeah.
Every time we can say it, we say it.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would add a third one, Tara, which is, this is me personally. You guys can decide if you disagree with this. I think you set some goals on the committee, diversity on the committees and diversity on the board. Like, within the next 4 years, we're going to have X amount of diverse representation on the board. We're going to have X amount of diverse representation on our committees. And, you know, I honestly don't know the diverse makeup of the board. It doesn't seem that diverse to me, but I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. I'm on a lot of boards and committees, so I don't know. But that, I would set some goals. I would do that pretty quickly, to be honest. I would, because that's going to take time. It's going to take the board helping you know, and helping your board chair to recruit into
Yeah.
so, and you're going to have to ask that question of people, you know, right now, we weren't doing that. I don't know if you were, you know, to John's point, I don't think we are at this point, but you know, you got to ask the question, is this a minority business owner? What does minority mean, to Ashley's point? Do we have a YP representation? Do we have, you know, a black female, a Hispanic male, you know, that kind, I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to get into that, but you need to define what diverse means for sure. And then incorporate that in the committees and the board makeup. And because it takes so long, you gotta do it sooner than later.
Right.
And we're,
Say that we haven't done it at all, because there was a very intentional choice to recruit Colleen Kirkpatrick to the board because of her background as well as her perspectives. But in generally speaking, we have certainly been more focused on some of the other regulatory requirements.
Yeah.
For sure.
well, that's where you're bound by the law and by the federal law, and I totally get that, but that's where I think this committee can, you know, can help nudge along and hopefully make some changes there. Yeah.
That's why we need this group. Okay, so for action steps moving forward, if you guys being Brent and Ashley would be willing to share your survey, we can try to repurpose that for our needs and get that out to the board as soon as possible. Ashley shared the link to the event, and so I will get that. I'm just gonna copy that right now while I'm thinking about it. I will get that out to the board asking for attendance. And then we also will get, let's see, sorry. Okay, I was trying to copy something that does not want to be copied. So we will also get the supplier hiring, you know, diversity, minority hiring piece that you mentioned, Katrina. I was actually thinking, you know, I'll definitely look over the one from CAC. That's probably all we need. But Ashley, like, if you guys have one of those, you know, certainly happy to take any documentation that you guys have, and so that we can kind of try to see what is possible with regard to adding that in to the RFP. So those will be kind of the first three things. Once over the court, now that we have a more routine meeting time, Katrina, in between now and the next time we get together, I will also try to schedule a coffee or something with you so that we can go over the framework that you had sent and try to see what other items we might want to look at in terms of once we get the survey results. You know, we can certainly wait until we get the survey results, but sometimes it's nice to kind of have a general idea of, you know, where do we want to go once we get these in, so that we can go ahead and be planning. Because we have a pretty full plate right now, so being able to plan in advance and be ready to respond, I think would be helpful.
I think the other one too, I think a fourth one is really looking to establish those goals for the board. You know, I think that too. The executive committee, goodness gracious. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if that's something we could mention today, that's what we want to do, and you know, over the next, by the next meeting, or you know, at the next meeting, whatever that's going to be.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think we can go ahead and begin that conversation now.
Yeah. So here's what I wrote, just so you guys can see sort of as far as notes. I didn't do like a verbatim, but that's what Simon does. But Simon's here, by the way, everybody can wave to Simon. But I wrote down sort of three main topic areas. So we've got board policies and practices. So that would be training and hiring and subcontracting policies, board makeup, which would be the survey of committees and board, committee structures, board structures, goals for diverse representation. And then I have a little bit less built out, you know, we'll start up here, the people being served, and so that programmatic side that we talked about, explaining the why. I like that, so I wrote that there. What is?
I think, Tara, under that 3 people being served, I think it's starting to ask those questions that they're not being asked. And maybe that's something that, you know, we can ask Brighton. I would think that they are collecting that information, but, you know, who are we currently serving? And is it reflective of the population?
Yep.
And more so, you know, it's one thing to say, you know, King County 7% Black, but how many, but looking at it even in terms of unemployment, because when you begin to look at it with that measure, then you know that the unemployment rate is higher.
Yeah,
For Black people.
normalize it against the macro.
Mhm.
Thank
The
you for
other
the
piece to
technical.
that is
term.
outreach, Tara. So not just what are you doing, but also how are we communicating?
Yeah.
One little nitpicky note, the goals for diverse representation, I think it's really important that that's put back onto the executive committee. I don't think MBO should decide that. It really needs to be from under the board chair's leadership and how we want to lead that conversation.
Okay.
And I think along with that is defining, like Ashley said about, you know, what do we mean when we say diverse? You know, I think that too, John, is at that executive committee level.
Agreed.
Yep. And I have,
And I agree. And I just want to tell you, John, if you go to the chamber and you go to events and committees, you won't find DEI. Our DEI is under the about. And so the idea being it's pervasive throughout everything we do. It's not just one. And so you're right. I mean, it's got to come from the EC and the top. And so I'm really glad you brought that up.
I'm really glad you're glad. You finally gotten some food, Brent.
Sorry to keep eating in front of you guys. I was hungry.
you're good.
Katrina will tell you I didn't eat breakfast and then I had to lead the board discussion, so I didn't get to eat. I'm pitiful. I'm breaking
I did
down.
the-
man.
Anyone else, if you don't care, take care of yourself first, Brent. Put your own mask on first.
Yeah.
And I probably ate like 30 minutes before you did. So I'm right there with you.
It's been a chamber day for sure. Crazy.
Um,
Anyway, but John and Tara, thank you all for doing this. I mean, I just think I'm glad we're not duplicating committees, for sure. But I mean, this is really great stuff and stuff that's unprecedented what you're doing. You know, the WIB, you know, has not done anything like this. And so I think you guys are going to be, you know, I'm really proud of it. Already, I'm going to be, you know, the stuff you're already talking about is something that I think you're going to look back in 10 years and say, man, we were a part of that. Look at the change we made. So thank you.
And Tara, I think too on there is talking about the linkage between the chamber DEI and this DEI, you know, and so we can even again at that executive committee look and see, you know, are there particular areas that we want to make sure that we are merging or integrating?
that is a really good point. Yeah, and I did not put that on this particular document, but we need that on there. How to.
You know
Okay.
what? Oh, I just want to make this point. You're going to get pushback. You guys know this, right?
What? No,
okay.
you're.
Right. It may be worse for you guys.
Vintage groups.
Yeah.
That's why I went to inclusion training, because I totally bombed.
Yeah.
I did not expect to receive as much pushback and defensiveness. Oh my God. Okay, so
Yeah. Me
long
either.
road ahead there.
Yeah. Well, it's worse with our public officials. And I'm not, I mean, I couldn't get county judge execs to sign off on our immigration stuff years ago, just to put it in perspective. Like the business community's been there. I think it's for the most part, there are pockets clearly, but I think for the most part, it's just something that's why this is so important is when you have NKU, Triad, Gateway, the Chamber, Meet NKY, and the Workforce Investment Board all saying, look, this is good business. We should be doing this. Then it helps lead our public officials who aren't frankly as educated on the subject, in my opinion. And so that's an editorial. We're not taping this, right?
We are. That's okay.
We are. All right. Well,
It's
yeah.
that part.
No
We
one
only
ever
take
looks at these
that
videos,
part.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, we'll use that over and over. Anyway, sorry, Tara, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Oh, I don't know.
But I think that's true. And, you know, I think Tara, for you to think about that, because you're going to really probably receive the brunt of the pushback. You know, they're not going to say it to me for sure, but they'll say it, that you'll hear that. And so I'm glad that Brent brought that up because, you know, it's the reality of what we're going to have to deal with.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. No worries. No worries at all. I'm ready. So, okay. I feel personally like I have a much more clear direction. So thank you for this hour. It's been extremely helpful. Katrina, I know that you're a busy lady, but I think there's a couple of things that will be helpful if we got together and sort of kind of said, okay, how, you know, what's next? Ashley's already been a huge resource and she had to jump off, but I think that's going to be really good to have her help. So that's great. And we will take these things here in like 30 minutes to the executive committee. And so the good news is, Katrina, is you have like tons to report out. So that's good. All right. Thank
So
you.
you're going to pull that form up. Thanks, Brent. Tara, you're going to pull that form up and we'll just talk through that at the executive committee. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The one that I just did, or the framework one?
One you just did. And just drop on there that definition on the top of that.
Yep.
On that. Yeah. And then we should be good.
And then I'll email it to you too.
Okay.
So then that way you don't have to just be looking at the big screen, trying to figure it out.
Other DEI committee. Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks, John. Thanks, Tara. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for putting me in.